our family carries the BRCA1 or BRCA1. And there's different markers and a lot more have come out, but basically it's a genetic mutation on one of your genes that the BRCA gene helps prevent. And then when it's not mutated, it actually kills cancer cells in the body as they're forming. Basically, that my mom carried it, and women who don't carry a marker. And of course, your risk of breast cancer is around 13%, or like 1 in 8 women. When you carry the BRCA1 gene, it's up to like 50 to 80% chance that you'll get it. So it goes from 18% to 80%, which is like the other end. And then ovarian cancer, most women, it's around 1% chance of getting it. And when you have BRCA, it goes up to 70% chance of possibly getting ovarian cancer. So I also carry it. I found out I was positive. And so for me, I think it really shifted a lot of things in my brain. Seeing my mom go through this most of my life and seeing her go through cancer treatments and surgeries and seeing her body go through this and all of these pieces. So I think there was that level of witness it and seeing her experience. And also I think because of the BRCA piece, it was like, okay, like I felt very empowered to be like, all right, well, let's live this life. Let's do the things that bring me joy and like really allow me to have fun and work in a job or a career that brings me enrichment or that I feel that I'm making an impact.
Hello, and welcome to Find Your Fuel, the podcast where we bring you stories from women who've overcome different physical, mental, and emotional struggles and found the fuel to live their best lives. I'm your host, Erin Martin, and today we sit down with one of my good friends, Christa Nenaber, who shares her incredible journey of taking control of her health after finding out that she carried the BRCA genetic mutation, a marker that has affected her family for generations, with both her mother and grandmother experiencing cancer at young ages. She faced the heavy decision of undergoing a preventative hysterectomy and mastectomy at a young age. And today we dive into how she navigated the decision, HRT, reclaimed her energy, and learned how to advocate for her own well-being. So if you're one of the many women who are impacted by breast or ovarian cancer and want to know more about the BRCA1 gene and resources for support, then this conversation is for you.
I always think about like when I, meet people or this comes up of like, where do you even begin with it, And I guess some of it, like, especially with like giving context, I think about some of the decisions I made for my health journey and life journey. I always preface it too that like all of these decisions, or when you're finding out health information, like I really do think everybody has to do what's right for them, and I think that's part of this journey too, is you're sifting through what feels right for you, but you're also getting information from friends or media or your family or a lot of people you care about that can make it, I think, really challenging. And there's a lot of different layers and emotions that have gone through this. And so I always just preface that too, and like be your own advocate, like find the teams and support partner doctors that feel good for you, and all of these are so important. And I also always preface too, like, no matter what it is, especially when it comes to the medical world, and Erin, I think you and I've talked about, if something doesn't resonate with you, like get a second opinion, find a different physician, find a different support network. And it's not blaming the doctor or that person. I just think it's really important as humans that we know, like, we are the ones who are in control of that. And like, so I always want people to be empowered with that too, and find those networks and reach out to someone who's going through a similar experience and ask those questions, because I think that's just such an important part of whatever journey that is, whether it's, I have a, genetic defect with a cancer mutation based on it, but whatever that is, maybe you're wanting to become a marathon ultra runner and that's something that excites you and you don't know where to begin, like find those people, So sorry, that's my little diatribe preface.
No, I love that. I love that so much. And especially the just seeking more opinions and also making that decision that's right for you, because I think it is really easy to get caught up in like, this is what everyone's saying, but it still doesn't feel right. And it's like, well, it will never feel right if it's not your decision. So you can feel more comfortable with your decision with more knowledge and power and education, which is where more support resources, second, third opinions, I mean, like fourth and fifth, unfortunately, at times, comes into play.
Exactly. And so, I guess how a lot of this journey is like, this is, in hindsight now, we now know that my family, this has kind of been a forever like cancer and breast cancer and ovarian cancer has been a part of my family for many, many generations. My grandmother, so my mother's mother, was diagnosed with ovarian cancer when she was 36 years old. She was a mother of 5 kids. So this would have been in the 50s, late 50s. She would have found out about this, and she ended up passing away of ovarian cancer 2 years later. So my mom was
Wow.
14 when she lost her mom. So that was kind of the first beginning of our, like, family. Oh, well, actually, I should correct. Her grandmother, had breast cancer as well, so, like,
Mm.
really far back. And then, my mom was first diagnosed with breast cancer. She would have been 49, so I was 12, and had found it was a very, like, aggressive form of breast cancer. It had gotten into her lymph nodes. So this was during the 90s. She did a lumpectomy first, and they also did a lymph where they went in and checked her lymph nodes. And I think it was 60 to 70% of her lymph nodes had cancer in them, which at that point they is it really shows that the cancer is starting to travel through your body. Also, I preface that if I misspeak on some of these medical stats, it's been a while, and also, but all to say, she went through a really aggressive form, like, treatment of chemotherapy and radiation, and she actually beat that breast cancer. So
And at that point, you were in high school or middle school?
I was in 6th grade when that
Okay.
happened. So, yeah, I was 12, and at that point, they honestly told us, they were like, "We don't the odds of your mom beating this is not good," just because it had already gotten into her lymph node system. So as a 12-year-old, you know what I mean, like, processing that, and so, that in itself had a lot of layers. I remember thinking, "Oh, I need to take care of my dad and my brother. I need to, like, this is the time for me to start helping with the house and kitchen and all the things, just, like, to support my mom in our family." And thankfully, she beat it. She is, like, just a little trooper, and just, moved through that, took care of her body, did all the things she could, and thankfully was able to beat it. So then she went into what would have been considered remission at the time. I think it's after, like, 5 years of no cancer detected, they usually move you into remission. And then I would have been, it was after college, and I was living in Vail, and I think, so I was probably around 22 or 23, and, they found a different breast cancer in my mom. And so what that meant was the first breast cancer had not mutated, it was a different cancer.
Mm.
Well, in some ways, that's a good thing because it hasn't mutated, and so it's like they felt like treatments would be really effective with it. So she went through and had a full mastectomy at that point. She had just had the lumpectomy, and so a lumpectomy is where they just move the tissue that is cancerous, but they left the rest of her breast tissue. And so with this one, they decided to do a full mastectomy, and she did do reconstructive as well. So that's where they'll, like, eventually put an implant in. And during this time, that I think more information was coming out in the medical world around genetic defects, and that there are these markers and links that connect and can put people at higher risk. So then with this conversation, so she started doing chemo again, and then her oncologist had, basically was like, "Look, there's cancer in your family. Your mom had died of ovarian cancer. You've already gone through menopause. You've already had 2 kids. Your kids are grown. So it's probably better to do a preventative hysterectomy and oophorectomy. So the removal of your ovaries, uterus, fallopian tubes." And so she went through that, and they came out of the surgery and were really hopeful. They were like, "We didn't see anything. There were no tumors. We're feeling really positive about this." And she ended up actually having microscopic cancer all over her reproductive tissue that they did not even, like, they didn't realize it was so small that they weren't able to see it during surgery. And so she went through, and then also had her peritoneum removed, which is like tissue between, I think, your small intestine and your reproductive tissue, to see if that, and it also spread there. So basically, it had kind of just started already spreading in her abdomen. And she started doing chemotherapy on the ovarian, because so she beat the second breast cancer. And then she started doing treatments on her ovarian cancer. And so she did that for about 10 years just on the ovarian cancer. So this whole journey for her was like 21 years, which is
Yeah,
mind-blowing to
wow.
me, honestly. So the chemo on the ovarian cancer, they found that it kind of managed the cancer, but it didn't cure it. So when she was on the chemotherapy, it would bring the cancer cells down. She would finish kind of like a 3-month round of it. she would get off of it. And then after about 3 or 4 months, her cancer cells rose and then they would start it all over again. And she did that for about 10 years. Once they found out about the ovarian cancer, she was also then tested for genetic mutation. And that's what was kind of coming out, more knowledge around that. And no surprise, our family carries the BRCA1 or BRCA1. And there's different markers and a lot more have come out. But basically, it's a genetic mutation on one of your genes that the BRCA gene helps prevent. So, like, all of us carry this. And then when it's not mutated, it actually kills cancer cells in the body as they're forming. But our family, that when you don't have it, those cancer cells basically grow without this extra like layer of protection, or basically this like little army that goes in and helps get rid of them.
And when she got that test, was she doing it for, like your knowledge? Was she doing it for the whole family's knowledge? What was kind of her decision behind doing that test?
Yeah, I think exactly that. I think it was knowledge for her and her oncology team to kind of understand the why. But then I think exactly knowing, like, am I passing this on to my kids? What's going on here? I want
Yeah.
knowledge. My dad's a retired general practitioner as well. And so I think for us, we feel really, we're very science based in that, of like, we want that knowledge to be able to make what decisions are best for us. And so I think very much for her, it was like, I want to understand the why and let my kids know. And actually, I think I was 25. So a couple of years after she had had the breast cancer, and then we found out she had the ovarian cancer. It was actually Christmas morning. This is kind of classic, my family. And I distinctly remember it was like Christmas with just like my dad, mom, my brother, and I. And we're having this Christmas. And then all of a sudden I could sense, I was like, the conversation shifted. We just got into serious mode. And our parents told us about this genetic marker. And basically, that my mom carried it. And when you carry it, so most women who don't carry a marker, and of course, your risk of breast cancer is around 13%, or like 1 in 8 women. When you carry the BRCA1 gene, it's up to like 50 to 80% chance that you'll get it. So it goes from 18% to 80%, which is like the other end. And then ovarian cancer, most women, it's around 1% chance of getting it. And when you have BRCA, it goes up to 70% chance of possibly getting ovarian cancer. Yeah. So it's a big pendulum shift. And so I remember my mom telling me about this, and then they just kind of talked through like, this is what a genetic test is. It's totally up to you if you want to have it done. And for me, it just was never a question. I was like, I'm absolutely, because for me, I was like, I want to know, I want to be able to have this knowledge to make the decision. But also like each step of these is like, everybody has to decide what's right for them, because it does come with all these other pieces. So it turns out both my brother and I carry the marker. For men, you don't have as many, like there's still prostate cancer risks and colon cancer increase a little bit. But a lot of it is, if he's now had 2 kids. And so, could he pass it on to them? And he has 2 boys. And so at some point, I think they'll let them know, like, do they want to, be tested or not? And it ends up, when women carry the gene, it can be passed through the father or a male carrier, but then, it tends to show up more on that risk for breast and ovarian cancer for women.
Mm-hmm.
So I also carry it. I found out I was positive. And so for me, I think, it really, in hindsight, I was just actually talking about this on this hut trip with someone. I think it really, shifted a lot of things in my brain, in the sense of like, it felt like a lot of like, this feels like, knowing that, seeing my mom go through this most of my life, and seeing her go through cancer treatments and surgeries, and seeing her body go through this and all of these pieces. So I think there was that level of witnessing it and seeing her experience, and then thinking about my experience and what I wanted to do. And then it was interesting, because at that same time I was working a job that I completely hated. It was like 3 years. I was in a design field. It was super stressful. And I remember having this very distinctive moment of like, this is not what I want my life to be. And
This
like,
ain't
also,
it.
yeah, this ain't it. Like, there's got to be other things I can do. And also, I think because of the BRCA piece, it was like, okay, like I felt very empowered to be like, all right, well, let's live this life. Let's do the things that bring me joy, and like really allow me to have fun and work in a job or a career that brings me enrichment, or that I feel that I'm making an impact. So very quickly, like honestly, like quit my job probably within 6 months, maybe or less, went and volunteered in South Africa, and then like bounced around to all these things. In hindsight now, I realize like that was actually a pretty pivotal moment for me in life, of like, okay, I'm switching.
And you were
And
25 then? Was it, or
25.
20? Yeah.
Yeah. And so all the information the night, and so then I started meeting with, so I found that out. And then I started meeting with oncologists and all these different doctors and finding out based on like my family history, there was information kind of saying, like, what are your different options for kind of moving forward choices? So for example, they did a lot of screening for both breast cancer and ovarian cancer. So every 6 months, I basically had a screening on my ovaries, and I also had a screening on my breast tissue. And so that was a form of everything from, I think I'd have a mammogram every year. And then on the 6 month mark, I would have a color contrast MRI to detect for my breast tissue. So especially in young women, our breast tissue tends to be more dense. And that's essentially what a tumor is more dense tissues. Typically, a mammogram, especially as we're older and our breast tissue isn't as dense, that's what it's detecting. But when you're 25 and doing a mammogram and everything looks dense, they tend to use an MRI color contrast to be able to see if that tissue changes. So I was doing that, respectively every 6 months. And then I was also doing ultrasounds for my ovarian cancer risk and things like that. And so that was 25, I started doing that. And what was interesting is so thankfully for a while, like all of my like mammograms and MRIs on my breast tissue, everything was fine and normal. But every time I was going in for ovarian like screenings, there was just something off each time. Like one of them, I wasn't getting enough blood to an ovary. So I had to go to a specialist, and that could have meant a tumor on my ovary. And then we like removed that. They were like, no, that's not it. And another time I had cysts all over my ovaries, and that could have been endometriotic cancer. And so there was just kind of each time there was something weird about my ovarian screenings. And one of the tricky things about all cancers are not great. They're awful. But with ovarian cancer is the tissue's not very accessible. Like it's deep
Yeah.
inside our body. Like breast tissue is much more accessible. Skin, there's a lot of things you can get to more easily. I remember literally meeting with the specialist and asking him, like, what do I need to pay attention to for ovarian cancer? And he was like, to be honest, not many people get it, and we just don't know a lot about it, and it's really hard to detect. And he's like, and most people, by the time they have symptoms, which is like bloating, cramping, like abdomen pain, I'm like, so my monthly period, like
Yeah.
menstrual cycle symptoms. So he's
That
like,
happens
yeah,
every
pretty
month
much.
to
I'm like,
me.
yeah. And then he was like, those are the same symptoms. And by the time a lot of people get symptoms, it is really like it's much further along than like early detection.
Mm.
So I was kind of like bouncing around and, living all these different places, but still seeing different doctors. And so it was like 3 years. Oh, so the part about based on my family history, they had recommended that so treatments, there isn't like a early treatment. So a lot of basically what they talk about is to really bring your risk from that like high, 50 to 70 to 80% chance down to a much lower percentage is basically removal of the tissue. So having either a mastectomy, a preventative mastectomy, or having a preventative hysterectomy, oophorectomy. And beyond that, it's or just like doing these screenings and hoping you catch it early is really a lot of what the processes are. And so if the choices for like recommendations were if I decided to do the preventative surgeries for a hysterectomy, so having my ovaries removed or oophorectomy, they said by 32. So that was based off of they're using the information of both my mother having it, but also that my grandmother got it so early, was to have my ovaries removed by 32 and then having a mastectomy by age 40. So that was also this piece that was swirling around at like 25. And so as I was getting kind of like going through these screenings and for whatever reason, when I like 3 years into it, and maybe that was some of it is like knowing that they found my mom's ovarian cancer at a very microscopic level. And it was so aggressive that she in the end passed away from ovarian cancer. And then also that my grandmother died of ovarian cancer at such a young age. There was just this kind of like internal piece of me, and then keep getting these screenings that are like, we're just not really feeling so great about this, but it's not quite cancer yet, and then so for me, like 3 years of screenings, I just got to a point where it's like, I can't, for whatever reason, I literally just like woke up one day and I was like, okay, this is time for me to have this surgery and have my ovaries removed. And that was a really interesting, because I was 27, so I wasn't very old. I wasn't married. And so there's all of these pieces that go along with that of like, do I want to have a family? What if I meet someone after this and we want to have a family? What if, like, do I freeze my eggs? Do I not freeze my eggs? And that one was really interesting too. internally for some, not my parents really understood and were really supportive of kind of this whole journey with me. And I feel so thankful for that. And my brother, but some of my family, my aunt and uncles really struggled with that. Like very much were calling me of like, you're giving up on a family, and so, which I also get, you know what I mean? Like that's been something that's been an important journey in their life too, but also made it really challenging of like, I'm trying to so that was kind of that beginning precipice of like, there are so many pieces that come into this, but I likened it to my aunt when I was talking to her about it. She literally called me a week before I decided to have, my surgery was scheduled, and her son smoked cigarettes. And I remember I said, your son smokes cigarettes and you don't want him to smoke cigarettes anymore because it could cause cancer, right? And she's like, yeah. And I said, this is me quitting cigarettes. That's the level of it. And so, and for me at that point, I had decided, even though I didn't have, I wasn't married and I didn't have a partner, I had kind of, and I thought about, do I freeze my eggs and maybe later on? And I think also knowing that I could pass this gene to someone, and my hope is 20 years from now, there's better technology, better screening, and that someone doesn't have to make any of these choices. That's my true, honest hope. But I think for me, I was like, I don't want to give my daughter that news.
Yeah.
So I think for me, and I also knew in my heart that like when I met the right person, which thankfully I've met this amazing human and husband, we would figure that out together. So like if we wanted to have a family, we would have a family. If we wanted to have kids, we would figure that out, whether or not there are biological children. And so all to say, yeah, at 27, I did the full surgery. So some people will just do their ovaries removed. But because also it had spread for my mom to all of it, I had fallopian tubes, uterus, ovaries, and my cervix all removed because I was like, I don't want to come back in and do this again in 10 years. I was like, let's just be, done with it. So, which then interesting as you can think about like that, then now it's like, now I have no hormones in my body,
Yeah.
That was an interesting, and what was also interesting is when I was talking to doctors about this and making the decision, I remember the woman who did my surgery, and she was an amazing physician in Vail. And we were going through it and I felt really confident. And I remember the last like appointment I had before the surgery, and she and I went through this. She was like, you know what? If you were my daughter, I would be telling you to do the same thing. She was like, based on all of your family history and all of this information, she's like, this is pretty gnarly. And when I was bouncing around seeing all these different doctors, I remember a lot of doctors will like read your chart as they're coming in. I mean, they're very busy. I get it.
Yeah.
And I remember a lot of them would like be quickly reading our family history and their eyes would just get big like, oh boy, I've got to like tell you. And I was always like, don't worry, I know what my risk is.
Yeah.
You don't have to retell me. But all of them were like, wow, this is a lot in your family. And so I think that felt very comforting and validating too, of like deciding to do that. But then now I was 27 and your ovaries are the large way that women get their hormones, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, all these things, all our sex hormones. So that
Yeah, because
was,
what was that surgery like? And then post-op,
oh yeah,
what was that like? And getting on hormone replacement therapy and even figuring out like where to start with that or
right.
where they started you?
So the surgery recovery is interesting too, because it's like microscopic, is that the right word?
Mhm.
Yeah. So I mean I had like 3 little incisions that are like a half inch on my belly. Now I can't even see them anymore. The scars have, I mean they use glue to close them up. You're just like, what
That's
happened?
wild.
Yeah. How did you do this? But it's like, and I remember she also told me that they fill your stomach up with, I think CO2 to inflate it. Like they put all this air in your body to make a bubble so that they can move around and do
Wow.
the surgery. But then afterwards, the gas has to go somewhere. So it like moves up to your shoulder and it takes like a week to dissipate out of your body. So you have like, you're just achy. And so the surgery itself, I was young, I was healthy. I'd really focused on being really physically strong going into it because I wanted my body to be able to recover as quickly as I could. So respectfully, I think doctors were like, oh, you're doing really well. But most women are usually later, in their 50s and 60s when they have this. But
Mhm.
it's definitely kind of a like, they're like, you can start walking slowly, walk a mile or, but thankfully I was like able to use my arms. And so a lot of it is just like that letting your body tissue heal. So I think from a mental standpoint, because you couldn't see anything, I didn't have a cast or stitches, I had to kind of keep reminding myself like, yeah, you're tired and you're exhausted because your body is healing.
You had
Like,
major surgery. Yeah.
yeah, I've never had a baby, but I can only imagine like your whole body is going through this experience. And I'm not likening this to pregnancy at all because this is very different. But like when I think about, some my friends when you've all had babies, it takes your body a long time, I imagine, to
Yeah.
like just want to, yeah, like get up and go to like to the bathroom and go to this, kitchen because you're exhausted. Your body's healing. And then in that case too, you're also like feeding a human and all these things.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the surgery itself, a lot of that was just like giving myself some time. So I think it was a few weeks. It's been a while, honestly. At this point, I actually was just talking to someone who's having that surgery. She had it like 2 weeks ago or 2 months ago. And we were talking to her. She's like, "Do you remember what it was like?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's been so long." But she was reminding you just get a real dull ache in your abdomen. And yeah, your body's exhausted from it and is really trying to heal. And then the hormone piece, when I was talking to my doctors, we were all kind of, they're like, honestly, we don't have a lot of 27-year-olds who do this. So we also know we don't want you going into menopause. So let's at least keep you on estrogen and progesterone. So basically, I think I stayed on what my oral birth control had been before my surgery. And I did that for about a year. And in that time, I had actually moved to Alaska and I was guiding in Alaska for like 6 months. And then I like came back and saw my family like that fall. And I just remember like all summer in Alaska, I was like, man, I am just exhausted all the time. And like, people would want to, and I mean, it was a physically, you used your body a lot in the job, but I wasn't like, going and mountaineering every day or doing these like epic ski
Yeah.
adventures. A lot of times it was like you're hiking for 5 miles in a day and you're like carrying some stuff and taking people out. But I just remember, people on our days off would be like, let's go do this cool adventure or this. And I just did not have the energy to do it. And then I even remember when I moved back to Colorado and started my job, I would like bike to work and it was like, I don't know, 4 miles each way. And same thing, I was like, I cannot go work 8 hours and then bike home for 4 miles. Like there was just, my brain couldn't comprehend it. It felt overwhelming. It felt exhausting. I was having a lot of brain fog and fatigue. And I remember visiting my parents, it was probably around Thanksgiving. And I got home and I like called my mom and I was like, "Mom, something feels off. Like something's just wrong." And she brought up, she's like, your dad and I were actually going to talk to you about it because we could tell you weren't yourself. And like,
Mm.
I think I was probably looking back, I was depressed. There was a lot of things. And my dad had done a lot of research about women who were postmenopausal and had been put on like antidepressants. And they had started doing some studies of taking them off their antidepressant and actually adding testosterone and estrogen as like a hormone replacement. And a lot of women were feeling a lot better. And so that was kind of a big aha moment for me. And so I ended up switching to, I think it was called Ester Test at the time. And so it's basically estrogen and testosterone. And honestly, within a week, I felt like a light came back on. So
Oh
it
my
like
gosh.
that testosterone itself, I was like, I like joke about this. I'm like, no wonder all these athletes dope on it. It's like the greatest drug on the planet.
Yeah. Brought you back to life.
Yeah, like my brain felt like it functioned. I could like problem solve quickly. Like my muscles could recover. Like I had energy and desire to be physically active and a sex drive and all those things that I just was kind of feeling apathetic about. I was like,
Oh,
"Meh,"
yeah.
you
Which
know?
is where I think oftentimes, I mean, I could be wrong on this, but it seems like oftentimes depression can come from that when you're in that constant, just struggling to try to feel normal and then feeling
Yeah,
crazy because you don't know what it
yeah,
is, but it's off. And so you just kind of end up in this headspace that's like foggy and messed up and just struggling. So the fact that your dad helped you figure that out is so
no.
amazing.
I know, and I feel so thankful to like have that. Like that's such a blessing and a privilege to have someone who was living with my mom and obviously cared and loves her to then also have the resources and the knowledge, but also like to go through all these medical studies and like that's also just like how his brain works. So yeah, I feel like so thankful that that was part of it. And so I was on Ester Test for oh my gosh, 5 years maybe, 7 years. I lose track a little bit. And overall it worked really well. It was just a pill I took every single day. But then I kind of started feeling like it wasn't quite right, maybe this is the part I don't understand about the hormones and pharmaceutical drugs and all that stuff of like, does your body adapt? Does it wear out over time? Does it adjust? So that's the part I don't fully understand. But then I started seeing a internal medicine doc who also did a lot of functional medicine and had done a whole, So we started working together and he did a ton of blood panels and micronutrients and my hormones. And we ended up, I actually get now my hormones compounded for me. And
Mm.
so we did, so now it's basically like a cream that has progesterone, two types of estrogen, estradiol and estrogen. I'd have to look it all up, but then DHEA, which is a sex hormone that helps a lot of them communicate, and testosterone and progesterone. So, and it's a cream form because some of the other concerns about taking orally can be like blood clots and things like that. And so processing it through your skin.
And compounded just means it's made specifically for
Correct.
you as well. Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you. Yeah. So that is, and I've been using that now for, yeah, probably 7, 8 years. And that takes a lot of time too. It's like you test something out and you got to wait 3 months. How do you
Mm.
feel? Get a blood draw. What are your levels? And then we're like, okay, well, we need to dial this part down, but keep this. And then you wait another 3 months and do another blood draw and test it again. And so honestly, the hormone journey, I mean, I've been doing it now for 15 years probably. I feel so thankful that I have the resources and the time and the ability to do this, but it also does take a lot of time. Like now it's interesting. A lot of our friends are in this perimenopausal time and world and are looking at HRT, which I feel thankful too that a lot of the things about kind of the negative publicity around it and concerns have been debunked. So
Yeah.
that if that feels, it feels safer to, I think, explore it, where I felt like before you had to make a decision like, do you want a great quality of life or do you want to risk it? You know what I mean? So I feel like it's nice that it's a safer look at it. So if people are, but it does. And it's like every person is different and what their body. And the other thing that I didn't ever think about is I don't know what my hormone level was when I was 27.
Mm.
Yes, it changes over time. Like obviously, naturally, my baseline at 27 would be different than now at 42. But I also I was like, in hindsight, if I'd known all this, I would have like went and had a blood test before I had the surgery and been like, what was my baseline? Like,
Yeah.
it's like my annual exam. I know what my like cholesterol baseline is for like the last 20 years of my life, but I never knew what it was for hormones. So
Yeah.
that's like a thing I
Ditto.
felt.
I've done that function health test and I'm like,
Yeah,
okay, the whole point of this is to get a snapshot of when I need those test results as a baseline in the future. And I'm like, why didn't I do it when I was like 30? But of course, like you're not worried, maybe about that
yeah,
when you're 25 until something happens. And then you're like, oh, I should be thinking about this.
right. Exactly. But all to say, like having those hormones, it has made a big difference for me. And like, I feel like overall I have probably the right level of like, I feel like I can be active. I can feel like I can, it is interesting because it's just a baseline. So you also don't have many shifts or changes since I have not had a menstrual cycle since I was 27. There's some of that, which is interesting, but I miss a good like menstrual cry. When you would just like get a good, like watch some sad, sappy movies. Kind of miss that every now and then.
You must have some pretty good nostalgia for like the olden days then of those, because I don't know if anyone else would be like, you're not missing anything.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't mind missing the rest of it.
There's so many friends who are on IUDs and they're like, oh yeah, this is the best thing in the entire world because then you don't get a period.
Right,
Which actually just went off mine because I was like, I want to know like where my baseline health is
right,
and have it. And then if something's going wrong and it's impacted, I know. Like I don't
right.
want it to disappear and not understand what's happening on that front. So
Yeah,
I actually did the
absolutely.
reverse, but
Yeah.
oh
So
well.
yeah, hormones. I've had my hysterectomy. Okay, so then I meet my husband. We get married. This is great. We're feeling good about our life. So, there we've decided to be the greatest aunt and uncles of the planet. That's our plan, or to take care of our one-eyed cat. This is our family existence. But that was, when like meeting, we were friends for about a year before we got together, and so he knew about my surgery and all of that. But I remember like 3 weeks into us actually dating, I had this moment. I think about this like if you were dating someone and 3 weeks in and he didn't know me, this could probably become just a bonkers question to bring up to someone. But I remember thinking, I really like this guy. So let's just broach the question about kids. I'm like, I'm going to put it out there, which everybody else would probably be like, don't do 3 weeks in. But I remember being like, look, I'm just going to put it out there. I like you. And I'm not saying we have to get married, but like, if you really want biological children, like if this is, is a deal breaker for you, let's just end this relationship. Like we can be friends still, like it's like early enough on. But if 3 years from now, you're like, I've always wanted biological children and this isn't going to work, then I'm going to think you're an awful human being.
Yeah. Because it's
Let's
not in the
just,
cards, literally.
it is not happening.
Yeah.
So that, but that also, I think it was like continued to show me he was this great person for me in my life of like how he showed up in that conversation, and just was very much like, hey, if we decide to have kids, we'll have a family however we want to. Um, and we can figure that out as we go along and we'll check in. And so all to say that has, also I think all of this has like made me almost be very real in some ways with friends or people or my partner pretty early, like, here's the real thing, which is kind of a blessing in a way too. I was like, well.
Yeah, and
Um,
kudos to you for being strong with knowing yourself and being strong in your own decision. Because I think at that time too, I mean, that's when so many of our girlfriend groups were getting pregnant, having
yeah,
kids, getting married, like right in the thick of it,
yeah,
when probably everyone could be looking at you and being like, "Oh my gosh, you don't want kids?" And you're like, "Well, that's not the decision on the table. Like, I do wish I had kids and I wish I didn't have the BRCA1. Like,
right.
duh."
You're like,
So,
yeah, here is what we're doing.
yeah.
But that is also interesting because I think when you tell people you don't have children, I've also now that I'm in my 40s, it's not as much, and probably because I've done, said it enough. But I think especially early on, there's this like connotation. People are like, "What's wrong with you?" And I was like, "Oh
Yes.
my gosh!"
Yeah.
I was like,
I should also back up and preface what I just said with if someone doesn't want kids, that should also be
"Right,
100% fine. And there are
yeah,
so many people I think that judge. It's like, whoa,
yeah."
calm down.
Right, exactly. Again, it's back to that, like, what's right for you piece, you
Yes.
know what I mean? So then let's see, fast forward to about 3 years ago, and I'd been doing all my breast screenings. So once I had my hysterectomy, I didn't have to do any more screenings on that because basically my risk of ovarian cancer was almost 0, which is wild to go from 70% to 0.
Yeah.
And so then I'd been doing my breast screenings every 6 months. Everything had been fine every single time. And I got a call about my MRI one time that they said, there's 2 spots on your MRI and it's not, we need you to come back in. And so my heart sank and I kind of thought, okay, this is like, because the MRI tends to be better detection than a mammogram. And I remember telling my husband, thinking, here's where we are. There's 2 spots. The odds are not leaning in our favor based on all of our knowledge. So I went in and they had to do a biopsy, which in itself is awful. Like, you're awake for all of it. They have to like drill in, they like squish boop, the whole thing. Thankfully, the tissue was not cancerous. But while I was waiting the like week that you're waiting, which is you're also like, do I really have to wait a week for pathology?
Yeah. Wow.
So I remember talking to my husband and I was just saying to him, I said, either way, I'm going to have this surgery. I'm going to have a mastectomy. If it's preventative or if it is, like if it is cancerous tissue, I know that that's what the doctors are going to recommend as part of the treatment. So
And
we found,
did that MRI result trigger that decision? Or had you always thought, I'm going to get a mastectomy at
mm,
some point, just don't know when?
yeah, I think I always knew I was going to do the mastectomy. I just didn't know when. They had said 40. I think I was 38 when I found out. Or when that MRI result happened. And so I knew I was going to do it. I think I just kept being like, my scans are great. So, or have been clean. So, I just kind of kept pushing it.
Hmm.
And I knew it was a much more physically demanding, I don't know if that's the right word I'm looking for, but like
Yeah.
it's a much
Surgery.
larger recovery surgery than the hysterectomy and oophorectomy. And so I ended up, thankfully those, yeah, they were benign. It did not have cancer in it. But then I decided that, during that week, I told Ethan, I was like, look, we're doing it. Either way, we're going. And he's always been very supportive of all of it, of like, whatever's right for you. And I'm here. And so I think I interviewed 6 or 7 plastic surgeons. I had time. That gave me the ability to have a little bit of time because I was doing it preventatively and not, like trying to, but I've also have friends in Denver who there used to be a group called Bright Pink that connected women who were high
Mm.
risk ovarian and breast cancer and BRCA. So a lot of us, I've been in touch with a lot of these people for over a decade that had already done that surgery preventatively, some who did it when they found out they had cancer. So I'd already gotten a pulse on some of the surgeons and had a breast surgeon in town. And I'd had a friend who I'd worked with who actually, she happened to just get breast cancer. She had no family history, no genetic, she had markers, but she was like 34, I think, or 32 when she got breast cancer when we were working together. So she had a surgeon. Anyway, I interviewed a ton of surgeons and found a plastic surgeon. Because I decided to do both the mastectomy and the reconstructive surgery. So the mastectomy is just the removal of breast tissue. And then the reconstruction is to have implants, but there's also different others. Like some people are able to do reconstruction with their own like body fat and things like that, depending. I was not a candidate for that, but yeah, so I went through that whole process. So found my surgeons, and you have two surgeons. You've got your breast surgeon who does the mastectomy and then the plastic surgeon that comes in. And I remember all these people telling me, like, make sure you really like your plastic surgeon. And I'm like, what? What is it? And they're like, because you spend a lot of time with this person.
Mm.
And you do. You're in there every week hanging out with them. So I had that October of 2021. Right? So how's it been that long already? It has been over 3 years. I did the first, and how my process was, and some people are candidates to go straight to implants, which I also was not a candidate for. I apparently have thin skin and all sorts of things. So basically, I had the mastectomy, and then they put in what was called an expander, and it's the best way to explain it is like a hard piece of plastic Tupperware that inflates over time. That's what it feels like. And they put that underneath your skin. And then over time, like every week, I would go in and they would literally inject saline into it, and it slowly inflates to get to the size that they want to someday then put the implant in. So it's like making, they call it the perfect pocket. It's like making a little like pocket for your implant to go into someday.
And
So
do they put that in the same surgery that they do the mastectomy? So it's like mastectomy, that thing goes in.
that was my process. I have heard where sometimes, like, if they get in there and something, there's all, because you are doing, they're removing so much tissue that sometimes maybe something happens in the surgery. So they do preface a lot of things like, here's how we hope it will go. And then, so
Yeah.
I've heard where some women get in there and they're not able to put that expander in, and they have to go back later on and, and have it put in later. So they were able to put the expander in right after the surgery, or in that same surgery. So they had that, remove the tissue, put the expander in, and then you go home for like, and wait for 3 months and do all this stuff. And that mastectomy is pretty intense. I like really think a lot about people who are also like going through chemo treatments with this and like all of those pieces, and everybody's body reacts differently and things like that. But it's like you also have drains that are coming out of the side of your body. So you have to like clean the drains. And I remember people telling me like the drains are awful. I'm like, how can it be that big of a deal? And I remember like 7 days in, I was like, because they're like right under your armpit and you're like bumping them. And it's literally just this plastic tube that's wiggling against your skin. And, it's like, it's just uncomfortable, and you're just like, and my doctor wrapped me in like saran wrap plastic because they want to hold as your body's
Right.
something to hold you. I also did nipple sparing. So there's different, when you have a preventative surgery, oftentimes you can decide to keep your nipples or not. And so I had nipple sparing for mine. Sometimes if you have cancer, depending where it is, they're not always able to do that. And so I technically still have my nipples. They look very different in the sense that they just look flattened out compared to what they used to. So, and then you have what they call T-Rex arms. So for 4 weeks, you
Can't raise your arms.
can't raise your arms. They're just like, this is your world. And so that was challenging. You're like, you can't cook, you can't do all the things you just want to help yourself and do. I remember the first week for me was really challenging to go for walks. Like it just hurt a lot. Like the tissue was so raw, and to have these like expanders and like any movement. And I remember that feeling pretty like deflating, no pun intended, because I just was like, I can't walk 4 houses away, much less, before I was able to be active. I remember I went to maybe 10 days in or 2 weeks in, I went to a oncologist, like physical therapist. And my mission was to get the back of my hand onto my forehead. And it was like 12 inches away from me. And I remember thinking, I can't get my hand onto my forehead right now, just because I had been doing this and you're like protecting your body for so long. And then, so I went in kind of every week. They inflated the expanders. I think 2 or 3 weeks in, like 2 weeks in, I was able to get the drains removed, which was like the greatest feeling ever. And starting to bathe myself and starting to like, in a few, like 3 weeks in, I think I was able to drive. And it was great. I even skied a few times, in between my surgeries. It was like a couple months in, I was like, I just got to get outside and move my body a little bit. And then about 3 months later, I had my what they call the exchange surgery. So where they take the expander out and put the implant in. And you have similar restrictions, but it was uncomfortable, but it was not to the level of like, they said they're like, your pain is going to go down much faster because it's just not as invasive at that point comparatively. So they were like, you have to just be honest about not using your arms because it's not going to hurt as much. Because when you're in pain, you're like, oh, I'm not going to do it because it sores. Yeah. And thankfully, both of them like went really well and really smoothly. Then probably like 3 months after my last surgery, I really was like, okay, I want to like, I honestly I never was a runner. And I remember I got connected with this great gal in Boulder. She also carries the BRCA1 gene and has done both surgeries preventatively, but she is a trainer and a coach and like a running coach. And so I got connected with her and did my first half marathon. Like I'd never been a runner in that way. And so just because I think I was like, I want to be able, I like wanted someone to help me get strong again and to be active again. So it's actually been really fun to like be stronger than I probably was before my surgery and be more physically fit than I was before my surgery and meet, these amazing people and kind of just be like, wow, I can do this. Like the body is this amazingly resilient thing, you got to take care of it. But there's also like, it's pretty amazing to think about like what it went through and all these things that people's bodies go through. And here we are.
Yeah,
So,
which is definitely saying something too if you're stronger and more fit than ever because you are very active. You're skiing, hiking, biking, you're all the things. And I remember you were one of the first ones of our girl group to really get into lifting weights.
oh,
And I remember when you were showing me your training plan, it was so long ago. It was whenever we
yeah,
went to Mexico. I remember thinking like, "Oh, I need to do this more. Like I should have just ripped and used your training plan because then it just fell off. I fell off the wagon and now I'm getting back into it." But you were the
yeah.
first one who was going hard into lifting weights, being strong, all the things.
Yeah. And spoiler, lifting weights is like the best thing women can do,
Yeah,
especially, we're in our 40s now. And man, it
retain
feels,
that muscle mass.
yeah, exactly. It helps for so many things in your metabolism and muscle mass and your joints. And yeah.
And so is there any post-op stuff you have to do
Hmm.
now for either of the surgeries and manage it, or is it just making sure the HRT's dialed? Like, what does it look like
Yeah.
today?
So I would say post op for me, everything's healed, which feels good. And a lot of it is like I still get some tightness in my like pec muscle. So as far as my like hysterectomy, all that stuff, like there's nothing I've got to do there except for the HRT. So I really have to focus on and for whatever reason too, probably just because during the mastectomy, if I am not lifting and exercising, I quickly lose pec muscle
Mm.
strength and upper body strength. So it's something that like I'll notice like, oh gosh, I had a hard time opening a door or something weird. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like make sure you're getting back on that. And then I also just have to make sure I'm doing a lot of like stretching and opening, like chest opening stuff to make sure, because otherwise, like, it's like this whole thing closes up and then I get neck pain. And, you know how it all links up together. So that's something that's really, I have to be really consistent about. Technically, I could do another surgery. So, like, I mean, it does look very different. Like, my implants look very different than, not very, that feels probably dramatic, but to me, it feels very different. And
Yeah.
honestly, it took a couple years. Probably at year 2, I was like, okay, these are kind of mine. But before that, it felt very foreign. Looking in the mirror felt really odd. That took me a while psychologically to be comfortable in my own skin. And even in front of my husband, at times I was like, this doesn't feel like me. And I don't feel sexy or desirable, like, because this feels so different than what it did before, which I think is a journey through a lot of different things that women go through in life, as a part of it. And so, like my doctor's like, we could do a second surgery or third surgery. And it's basically like, it's called a fat transfer where they basically do liposuction and then like fill in because I have rippling, which is basically where like you can see essentially ripples in my skin, like if I was standing, without any clothes on, because the implant, has a different texture than like what our natural body fat would.
Yeah.
I've just been like, whatever. I don't want to take time off again. I'd rather just be active and play. It's okay.
Paid some
I'm
dues
like,
there. Yeah.
yeah. My husband doesn't care, so it's like, whatever. We'll just but and maybe in 5 years I change my mind. Maybe I'm like, yeah, let's do it. But so overall now, like there's really just mostly maintaining my own strength and fitness is really kind of the thing.
Yeah. And one
Yeah.
thing I absolutely love about you is you are just so positive.
Mhm.
You have tons of energy and are just a kind and amazing human. So I'm also wondering, how do you just mentally stay positive and how do you get through
Mm.
that process, which you've definitely alluded to just the hard journey of going through so many things for so long, which it also looks like you were dealing with your mom, watching her do
Mhm.
the same thing and then you having to fight, a different battle, but similar in that way. So sorry, I'm
Yeah.
getting teary thinking of your mom, but like, how'd you stay so positive through that?
I think that is a great question, Erin. I think and thank you. That's like such a wonderful compliment. My mom was such an example in the sense of she was very real, and I think was really honest with us when she was in pain or uncomfortable or something was happening. And I remember her even saying this, that she did not want cancer to define who she was, And
Mm,
so I think and I think she also did a good job of allowing herself, like, when I need to literally just nap and take my space, I'm going to do that. And I don't need to say that this isn't hard or that there aren't hard things, but I think she also was able to really reflect and think about, like, and, especially when she was doing treatments, I think she was able to say, like, especially between her ovarian cancer, I remember she would, when she was feeling good and she wasn't on treatments, she was like, I'm going to go on a trip. I'm going to spend this time with my family. I'm going to do this thing and make memories and live my life because I am alive still. And this is something. And it doesn't diminish that I know that there was a lot of internal emotional things and pain that she also would talk about and go through. But I think she wanted to also be able to really embrace and enjoy. Um, and so I think for me, some of that was watching her and being like, okay, if like we can get through hard things together, and there is hard pieces of that. So I think that it's like a combo of one. I have a really great therapist. I'm a big believer of having someone who has helped me sift through and process seeing my mom go through this, but then go through this myself. Because it doesn't mean that there haven't been moments where I haven't been, like
yeah,
in
100%.
pieces. You know what I mean? Because I want that to also not be like, oh, everything's perfect and you just push through. Because that's also, I don't think necessarily the best thing.
Yeah.
I think going back to the beginning is like also having your people, you know what I mean? And whoever that is, like, and I don't think it's just one person. I can't expect my husband to be all the things I need emotionally for me, like
Mhm.
I've also have people like you and these amazing women in my life, whether they've been through it or not. I found those network of women who had these surgeries. So I also believe it's really important to have those people that you can talk to and say, today is really hard, and this is, and be able to like have it. But then I think I also try to really think about, like, I also feel very thankful and have gratitude of I was able to make this decision. I feel very privileged to be able to make this decision, not only from like where I live in the world, but also like financially to support myself, or to be able to like get strong, get all of those things. Because I think some people don't get to make this, they or have this information. So I feel very privileged, but also like have gratitude. Like I, similar to my mom, is like, I really want to, there's really cool stuff to do in this world. And I want to travel and I want to meet more people and I want to spend time with people like you. And, like I want to go on that girls trip every year when we get together, because that's the stuff that fills my soul. So I think there's some of that too, of like being able to acknowledge it, but also be like, okay, like there's also gratitude in kind of everything that's happening.
Yes, I love that. And since you've done so much research, it sounds like that you're just so knowledgeable on all this stuff. If anyone had a history of breast cancer or ovarian cancer, what resources are out there that you would recommend that they check out, or support groups
Oh,
they're a part of, or any of that kind of stuff for someone who has
yeah.
a similar journey they're going through?
I mean, one of the things that is really amazing about the social media world that we have now is that it's so much easier to get in touch with people now than when I was even 25, you know what I mean? And so while like Bright Pink doesn't exist anymore as a group, you could go on kind of any platform and put in BRCA1 positive, like you put in the hashtag if people still hashtag, but BRCA1 or any of those things are high risk. And all of a sudden, there's so many people who share their journeys. And everything I have found is women are so open to talk about this and support each other, which is so freaking cool. You know what I mean? Share their journeys and their experiences and who their doctors are. And so, like, one, please, anyone can reach out to me. I always feel very comfortable to be like, this is who my trainer was. This is who this person is. This is who my doctor was. Or like, these were the pants that I wore for surgery that were amazing. You know what I mean? Like things like, I would have thought you could wear yoga pants. And someone was like, don't get yoga pants after a mastectomy. I was like, "Oh, brilliant. You know what I mean? They're like, it's too hard to pull them up. And I was like, oh, okay.
Uh,
So things like that is where I feel really thankful about like the networks and social media. And so, and just like there's like a lot of really good research, University of Colorado has really great research and doctors, and so does Rose Medical, and just all over, especially in Colorado, there's just a really good network. But honestly, social media for finding that personal connection is such a great way to ask people questions, and then you can like really connect and build.
yeah, I love that. And if people did want to connect with you, where's a good spot for them to find you?
I'm not on social media as often anymore. So that's not the
That's
best
not
way.
a bad thing.
I'm sorry.
It's a good thing.
You could message me on Instagram, which is C Nenaber, spelled phonetically KNEENEIGHBOR, Or you can send me an email, which is just my first dot last name at gmail.com. That's works too.
I love it. Well, Christa, thank you so much for coming on. There's so many women I know who will value this conversation and be able to learn from you. So thanks so much for being vulnerable and opening up about it.
Well, thank you for having me, Erin. I love this. This is such an amazing podcast you've created. So thank you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Find Your Fuel. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how this story resonated with you and anything else you'd like to hear more of in the future. And if you want to support us, please write a review. It's super helpful in getting new people to discover the show and help other women find the fuel to live their best lives.